we'll just kind of get right to it with the video breakdown. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up the videos here. So this is an 89-meter throw from Jakub Vadlejch. Let's just kind of watch it all the way through here initially at full speed. All right, that might have been a little choppy, so let's watch it again. So there's a few things that are pretty unique about Vadlejch, especially through his release. But I'm going to just start this out from the beginning of his approach. So first thing that you'll see with Vadlejch is a really relaxed carry stride, running through into a left foot drawback position. So there's nothing super noteworthy about his stride or his rhythm. He's very relaxed and powerful. He's a very strong, athletic guy. When I was in South Africa, he was training with Jan Zelezny there, and they do tons of sprints. He's a really strong thrower. He spends a lot of time doing really relaxed throws at like different intensities, or at least he was during the couple weeks that I was out there with him. Where he'll set up cones out in the field at like 70 meters, 75 meters, 80 meters, and you'll see he goes through his approach at kind of like proportionate intensities to the distance that he's trying to throw. So he's a very, very relaxed thrower. He's very, very dialed in with his rhythm, his approach, his timing, etc. But he's definitely a big, strong, powerful guy. He has a lot of athleticism. And you can obviously see a lot of muscle mass as well. So that's kind of like setting the stage of this approach. But like I said, there's nothing really super noteworthy about his rhythm here. So as we kind of go through, he goes into this left foot drawback. So he draws back on the left step here. And by the time this right foot touches down, his arm is all the way back. He has a pretty low drawback position. He kind of pops it up a little bit higher off that right. So this is actually kind of a common theme in a lot of elite throwers, right? Drawback on the left, but then pop off the right. And from here, he's kind of a little bit like Neeraj Chopra in how he drives through his crossovers. It's not like he's rhythmically pumping his feet like pistons, kind of like roller. He's kind of just powering through them out of that drawback rhythm. So this leads into his penultimate, and really this is where Vadlejch gets super interesting, right? He, like I said, nothing super noteworthy about his approach, but there's a lot that's super interesting about his penultimate through release. So his penultimate step begins right here. So off of this left step, first, we can kind of just point out how through the crossovers, he follows the principles of athletic crossovers. So he's staying on the balls of his feet. He's active with his legs where that right knee swinging through in time with that left foot contact and vice versa. So when this right foot comes down, his left knee is already swinging through in the air to set up that position. And now through this penultimate step, before that left foot even contacts the ground, his right leg is already swinging through into that knee drive position. So he takes off on his penultimate right here. And this is a position that's very unique to Vadlejch right here. His left arm is all the way across his body. This is very similar technique to Barbara Spotakova. Both of them are coached by Jan Zelezny, which is interesting because Zelezny is the one kind of teaching them this form, but it's not necessarily how he threw himself, which maybe provides some insight into how Zelezny thinks about the throw. Not really sure about the explanation behind this, but the Czech technical model definitely follows that very, very closed off positioning. So Vadlejch is fully closed off. He has a short arm, so his arm is basically wrapped around his torso at that kind of max torque penultimate position. Now, going into back foot contact, so through that penultimate, going into back foot contact, when that foot touches down, he is still very, very closed off. So that arm is still across his body, right? It's interesting. It's a little bit deceiving because his arm is bent, so he looks more closed than he is. Kind of, he's still very closed. But if his arm was straight, his arm would probably be here. But because his arm is bent, it looks like it's kind of wrapping around his body here. I'm gonna let Yuhan on. So his arm is totally wrapped around his body here, but he's in a very closed off position. So this kind of goes against what I normally talk about with, right? You want your back foot contact with your left arm reaching long and straight in the direction of the throw. He is definitely across the body. But what you see is he's in a squatty back foot contact position, ball of foot. His heel is kind of touching down. But as you watch how he transfers off of it, he definitely rolls towards the front of his foot. So the weight is in the ball of his foot. So it's a little bit deceiving there. But it does seem as though his heel touches. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit too. He kind of has a little bit of a right to left stride from back foot contact to block, which is very important for how he maneuvers through this position. So at back foot contact, he's very close, but he has a really solid drawback position, squatty back foot contact position. His weight is athletic. He's not landing super heavy on his back foot contact. His heel's technically touching, but he's able to get off of it really fast and athletically. So from this back foot contact position, as he strides into his block, watch how his left side and his knee drop are totally in sync in clearing that left side. And when that block foot touches down, you can see here his block foot touches down and his torso is still very it's quite closed off still, but he's in this process of clearing it. And that right to left stride from back foot contact to block really helps create space for this javelin to still create this linear pull. So ultimately, the biggest issue with a closed off back foot contact when throwers struggle with kind of bad mechanics, a lot of the times the closed off back foot contact is a big part of that. And the issue is that they're not able to open up and clear the left side on time. So it's not necessarily that being closed off is bad 100% in itself. It just makes it way, way, way more challenging to get to the right positions at the right time. Vadlejch is super athletic, super talented, and he's obviously been working on this technique for a very long time. So he has figured out how to make this work. And what makes it work for him is he's very active with the left side. So you'll see from this totally closed off penultimate stride, he's very closed off. But as soon as this left arm starts moving in sync with that back foot contact, he's kind of flinging it open. So from here all the way through here, he's driving that left side. So even though Vadlejch is very, very closed, he doesn't stay closed. So he starts closed, but as a result, he has to have a more active left side than any other thrower that exists. So just because he's closed doesn't mean it's passive or that he's staying closed. So it's kind of a little bit of a mind twister to think about that. But because he starts from a more closed position, he actually has to be more active and open up faster. And a really important part of this too is that right to left stride from, honestly, kind of from his penultimate step all the way through his block. So if you watch where he's doing his crossovers from relative to this arrow on the runway, you can see he's on this side of it more so, right? He's kind of a little bit more towards the right side of that runway, our left, from where for our angle that we're watching. That he's on this side of the runway. But as he goes to that penultimate stride, right now he's kind of more towards the middle. And now through that penultimate step, now he's on the right side, and his block stride is way towards right this side, kind of towards our vantage point. So he started over here but ended over here. So he has this big right to left action from his penultimate step all the way through his block. And what happens is this creates space, right? When we're going linearly, I'm just going to demonstrate for you guys as I can. So when we're going linearly, right, if we plant our stride kind of right in line with our back foot contact, there's no space for our throwing arm to come through, right? We have to kind of work around the block if we land very narrow. If we have a wide block stride, now we get our body out of the way so that the arm can come through in this linear path, right? So if I'm holding my hand here, a linear path is going to be straight through here. And the only way to get that, right, if I plant here, well, now my head and my chest are in the way. So you have to duck down, dump the chest, side bend in order to get that linear path. So it's possible. But what Vadlejch is doing, because he's so closed, coming way out to the left, allows him to create that linear arm path. Now, especially when you take the penultimate stride into account with that, right, he's driving way closed, but because he's traveling to the left, it just creates that, path of he's clearing his body out of the way from his arm. So the biggest problem with that close off position is that your body gets in the javelin's way. But because of that right to left, he does a great job of creating the space. So from this position, right, even though his block plant position, it's still very closed off because he has that momentum to the left with his center of mass, and because he's so active in clearing that left side, right, his block foot touches here, but one frame later, you can see like his body's out of the way, he's colliding with that block, and then he's able to pull it up and around. So it's very different technique compared to what you'll see from a lot of other throwers, but it's these principles, right? And you can see how even through this release, his body's kind of on this, right, a very angled position. He's colliding with his block on an angle and kind of bouncing off of it towards the right. It's not a linear block. So it's, right, like I said, it's very different. It's very precise. This requires an insane amount of body awareness and athleticism to be able to do this. And it's an 89-meter throw, right? So he's at that highest level figuring this out. So even though, right, you could say he's an anomaly, he still works through these big picture principles. Athletic, right, smooth, relaxed approach into crisp drawback position, stable drawback position, athletic crossovers on the balls of his feet with active legs, penultimate step that sets up a squatty back foot contact, and a quick back foot contact to block, and he clears his left side on time, even though he has a different strategy for clearing that left side. And then obviously through that, he comes up and over his block and is able to put all of his energy through the follow through into the javelin in a linear aligned release. So all the principles are there. It's just different strategy for making it happen. So I want to compare that to Neeraj Chopra, because we looked at him in last week's call, and kind of like I was saying with Neeraj Chopra, is he's a little bit of an anomaly too, where he is right, a very kind of swaggy thrower, very wrapped, and then very rotational in how he releases. Vadlejch is a similar in how closed off he is, but again, it's totally different strategies for achieving the same thing. So let's just kind of look at this. Let's just look at this from the beginning. So relaxed athletic approach. You can see like both of them are very relaxed here. Vadlejch draws back maybe one step sooner. Look at how similar their crossover positions are. Again, Vadlejch is more closed off with his left shoulder, but they're both super wrapped. Both of them have this basically totally sideways javelin. And then we get, right, so back foot contact position for Vadlejch. That left arm is all the way across his body. Neeraj Chopra, right, he's almost in not quite as closed off with that left shoulder at the penultimate step, but Chopra begins rotating to clear that left side from penultimate to back foot contact. So at back foot contact for Chopra, his left arm is reaching long and strong, whereas Vadlejch at back foot contact, it's still way across his body. But now Vadlejch, as he strides into that block, this is a cool angle to kind of see his left side action. Look at how fast he clears that left side, and look at how he drives that left side action. So with Vadlejch, right, it's when we think about the left side action, it's not just flinging the left arm open, it's about setting a torso position. So again, I'll just demonstrate because I can. With that torso position, what I'm talking about, it's not, right, we're not just trying to fling open with that left side. It's from here, Vadlejch is able to maneuver his sternum, his rib cage, from a position where his shoulder's kind of closed off to a position where his chest is kind of at that 45-degree angle. A cool way of thinking about this, right? I always talk about the corkscrew drill, right? Where you're holding onto the tip of the javelin and you rotate. Another way to kind of think about that is if you've seen that javelin drill where you're in the weight room and you have the 45-pound plates attached to a barbell and you're kind of in that block position and you're holding onto the plate here and you rotate around trying to use that 45-pound plate as kind of the guide to rotate. It's kind of a similar left side action than that, where it's this around action from here to here. And it's way more about what the spine is doing and the rib cage, setting that sternum is kind of what I like to say. It's way more about that than what the left arm is doing. So we can kind of see the similarity there between Vadlejch and Chopra, where from that back foot contact to block, when that block plants and he really contacts the block, right, his weight is really hitting that back, the block foot plant right here. You can say his foot contacts one frame sooner, but his weight is really going into it here. You can see how his knee bends a little bit. His sternum, his torso, is facing directly towards the camera. It's facing at that 45-degree angle relative to the direction of the throw. And Chopra, it's really the same thing. So his block foot plants and his sternum is facing straight towards the camera. It's at a 45-degree angle relative to the direction of the throw. So they end up at the same place by the time their block foot plants. It's just very different styles of release, where Chopra definitely drops his chest and side bends a little bit more, and Vadlejch kind of rotates, kind of pivots around his block through that release. So different strategies, but really, really similar positions when you look at the right landmark body parts. So again, it's squatty ball of foot, back foot contact, quick right to left, clear the left side so the sternum is at a 45-degree angle relative to the direction of the throw, and then come up and over the block. So I hope that that's kind of helpful to see. It's like two very different throwers compared to the rest of us. They're both very different from the average thrower, but they're also different from each other. But even through these differences, there are still big picture similarities that are kind of taking place.